Oh man, I'm gonna go back to bed. Anybody else having an existential crisis? Hi, my name is Alana. Welcome to my YouTube channel. And on this channel, we review books. And this, I'm hopping right into it because this is going to be a lengthier review. And this is the longest review that I have written in some time, at least the beginning of the year. I think one of the longest reviews I wrote this year from a book that I read this year was probably Dragonfly and Amber, which is the second Outlander. So let's hop in. Dante's Inferno. This book made me, well, the Inferno made me work. This is all three of them of the Divine Comedy. So, but I just read Inferno. I'm going to put this over here. This thing is a door stopper. It's bigger than the size of my head. Don't fall. I heard it. Don't play. Dante's Inferno. Let's hop in. This book, Inferno, made me work. Is it a book? It made me work hard. Okay? I haven't had to review a book like this in a minute. Look at this absolutely ridiculous cup. This was my sister's. She left it. She's not getting it back because it's so absurd. It is so tacky. Look at this chicken. And then it's got the chicken's butt. Where did she find this? You left it, honey. You left it. It's mine now. It's ugly as all get out, but it holds water, so it does what it needs to do. There can, however, be no ascent past the beasts. The man who would escape them must go a longer and harder way. Inferno. The Inferno. Dante's Inferno. Dante. I'm really kind of disappointed that E doesn't have an accent on the end, but okay. This work is infamous, is it not? I think that if you have eyes, if you are alive, or were alive at one point, I'm so tired, you have heard the name Inferno, Dante's Inferno. It is infamous. And I think a lot of people think that it is an intimidating read. Not gonna lie, I found it to be one of the more challenging things that I've read in recent years. And I have skirted around it. I've heard of it. I know friends who've read it, and I kind of skirted around it. Very aware of it, but skirted around it, thinking that I either would not understand it. Yeah, thinking that I wouldn't understand it, thinking that it would make my brain hurt. Not because I wouldn't like it, just maybe it was one of those texts that I found mildly intimidating, like Les Mis. Anyway, why did I pick it up? It was recommended to me very specifically. And because of who it was, I was like, let's go for it, because I trust this person's opinion, and they were curious to know what I would think about it. So I was like, if this person's recommending it to me, must be for good reason. I'm glad I read it because, like I said, Dante's Inferno made me put in work. And this review took me, I'm not even kidding, 2 hours just to draft. I wrote it in 3 sittings, 2 hours total. That didn't include the editing. So here we go. The premise is well known. So Dante, my boy D-Money is putting himself in the poems. So my boy Dante he an OG, but okay. He's taken through the layers of hell with Virgil as his guide. And in this first installment of the Divine Comedy, in the Inferno, hell, Dante is using it in this journey as an allegorical work. It's a critical work. It's a spiritual work. He's critiquing various entities like the government and the church, people who personally did him wrong. Savage. And also he's calling out historians. He's calling out, I don't know if I would say historical figures rather. Both real and fake. We'll get into Greek mythology at the end. And I also think he's answering the question that many of us ask, does perfect justice exist? Dante, my boy D-Money, would he be rolling over in his grave if he knew I was calling him like some peasant and the United States was calling him D-Money? Or maybe he would like it. If I was him, I would like it. But I call Dostoevsky D-Money. I gotta keep with Dostoevsky. He's my favorite. Anyway, Dante, the review is gonna be, get some tea, go get some coffee, go get a snack, because go wash the dishes. This is going to be a long one. Dante was a devout Catholic, and one of the main themes he addresses in this work is how human logic has its limitations. Again, I don't know if he's going to use the next two installments where he goes through purgatory and then he goes to heaven to also kind of have to talk about these limitations of human logic. Probably, don't know, can't say because I haven't read it yet. But he is talking about human logic is fallible. There are some things that occur that have no logical explanation, and in order to understand these abstract things, one must look to the spiritual. And because this is Dante, and he's using the Bible and the God of the Bible to answer this question about, or to reveal human logic and human reason has its place, but it is not all-knowing, it is fallible, and we need the spiritual to fill in those gaps. This is the highest state a man can achieve without God, and the glory of it dazzles Dante, but he knows that it is nothing compared to the glory of God. So Dante is drawing a distinction between worldly wisdom, which does have its place. He's not discounting that there are the greats, Aristotle, etc. But worldly wisdom can only take a person but so far. But when there is no spiritual enlightenment, that person is still limited. However, when that enlightenment is being guided by God, or when a person allows God to take the forefront of the truth, then that person, or one, let's use the word one, Dante is arguing that is when you get this proper alignment between truth and knowledge and logic and reason. There has to be the spiritual to balance it out. Again, because there are things that cannot be explained. You do not question what souls these are that suffer here before you. I wish to know before you travel on that these were sinless, and still their merit failed. I might have a typo there. And your good works will be your enemy. The signature of honor they left on earth is recognized in heaven, and wisdom ease in hell out of God's favor. Ouch to that last quote. So basically, in particular, that last quote is saying how you can achieve all of this worldly success, and even God may say, yeah, you did a good job, but you still were missing me as that critical piece. And so, I'm sorry. So, they have an ease in hell, but their truth, their human striving was not enough to win their souls to heaven. So when I was reading, this is why this review, when did I read this book? I read it in November, in the first half of the month of November. And I didn't sit down to review it until about a month later because I needed to marinate, and I had all of these thoughts in my head, and I thought I knew where I was going to take the review. So when I did my very rough outline, meaning I take a Post-it note and I go through all of my annotations and I start to categorize my annotations into themes. And from there, I pick what themes I choose to focus the review on. I can't do all of the themes. We'd be here for 2 hours. So I pick 3 to 4. And so then when I started to do my more detailed outline, meaning I'm pulling the quotes I want to use, I realized I had to then take the Bible and line up with passages that I knew Dante was referencing. So we're going to go over what I pulled. The quotes I pulled, what I noted above, Dante reminded me of several Bible verses. Reminded me of several Bible verses that emphasize that the notoriety that one can gain in the world through one's own merits, one's own successes, those are fleeting. You can't take them with you to the afterlife. They may be acknowledged to some extent, but they're not going to save you. And so those good works cannot save the soul, as the soul is only saved through faith and grace, not through merit. So this is what Dante is arguing, and that's how some people think that they can do. That's how these individuals ended up in a certain layer of hell, because it wasn't enough, unfortunately, even though they did have some type of worldly contribution. In the same vein, a person of faith should also be conscious of how they carry themselves. It works both ways. Matthew 7:16 says, "You shall know them by their fruits." And so to continue to back up why Dante is arguing this, I have 3 passages, 3 verses. "What good is it, my brothers and sisters, if someone claims to have faith but has no deeds? Can such faith save them? In the same way, faith by itself, if it is not accompanied by action, is dead. But someone will say, 'You have faith, I have deeds. Show me your faith without deeds, and I will show you my faith by my deeds. You believe there is one God. Good. Even the demons believe that and shudder.'" So that's James 2, verse 4, and then 7 through 19. "What good is it for someone to gain the whole world yet forfeit their soul?" Mark 8:36. "For by grace you have been saved through faith, and this is not from you, it is the gift of God. It is not from works, so no one may boast." Ephesians 2, verses 8 through 9. So again, this is one of those texts that as I was reading it, I had to make notes to go back and say, okay, where is Dante pulling this up from? Why is he arguing this? And this is why he's putting certain types of things in certain layers of hell. So it is also an undeniable theme in the Inferno that there is a stark contrast drawn between darkness and evil and light and divine protection. Meaning, we're talking about hell here. So there's got to be something to balance it out. Like, there's got to be something that balances out the darkness in the world. There's got to be something that balances out the insanity, right? So through his descent through hell, actually, Dante is often overwhelmed and terrified by what he is seeing and experiencing. It's a complete overwhelming of the senses. He faints multiple times throughout this work. I can't say I blame him. However, he always comes to. And he is reminded that regardless of the horrors that he's witnessing, they pale in comparison to the light. That's a capital L. Light here is in the work is used with a capital L, meaning it's divine. And divine protection, again, capital B, capital D, capital P, again, emphasizing that it is of God. It is heavenly. And so, again, this is a very, very biblical theme. Dante knows this and he is emphasizing it. And there are, again, so many scriptures that Dante is referencing here. He's saying, he's what's the famous word that we all of us book reviewers say? He's showing, not telling. He's just dropping those hints. He's leaving the breadcrumbs, but he's pulling directly from scripture. Regardless of the darkness that he was experiencing in hell as he's going through it and he's seeing all of this, darkness cannot exist in light. Once you shine a light in a dark space, it has to flee, right? You can't have dark and light coexist. So here are some verses to back that up. "The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it." That would be John chapter 1, verse 5. "Do not gloat over me, my enemy. Though I have fallen, I will rise. Though I sit in darkness, the Lord will be my light." Micah 7, chapter 7, verse 8. And again, Dante is emphasizing here, no matter how dark it feels, no matter how overwhelmed one feels, literally overwhelmed as he is descending through hell. Maybe this is a synonym, maybe not a synonym. Maybe this is an analogy. Could one apply this to oneself if you feel like you're going through hell and back? I think you could, metaphorically speaking. That when Dante felt at his lowest going through hell, right at the opportune time, divine light, divine protection would step in and keep him from being completely overwhelmed and overtaken by what he was experiencing. Where's my organ? There's a lot of dichotomous imagery throughout this work. Again, dichotomous with light and dark. He's experiencing foul smells and screams and textures and things are goozing. There's a lot of body fluids. He's experiencing all of these layers of hell. He's seeing just really bizarre things. I mean, stuff that'll give you nightmares for the rest of your life. Like my boy probably got PTSD. And it's still contrasted, again, dichotomously with these images of the hills, greenery, capital L, light. Because Dante is constantly being reminded that darkness cannot fully overtake him as he transcends hell following Virgil. Virgil did land in hell, by the way. Midway in our life's journey, I went astray from the straight road and work to find myself alone in a dark wood. How shall I say that wood? How shall I say what wood that was? I never saw so drear, so rank, so arduous a wilderness. A very memory gives a share to fear. That was actually in the very beginning of the poem. And Dante here is, so he hasn't actually descended through hell yet, but Dante is recounting how darkness could have overtaken his life, but he chose to not. He's choosing a different path than these individuals who ended up in hell. He's actually able to see what he can avoid before it is too late. I think there's another way to read this text. Because in a way, Dante is saying, oh, I'm successful, I'm talented, but that isn't going to save him. He doesn't want that pride to override the role of God in this situation, or in his life, rather. So here's another quote that counteracts. Again, it's literally on the next page of my edition. So you have that quote, and then it's contrasted very swiftly with a rebuttal, with a sense of hope. But at the end of that valley of evil, whose maze had sacked my very heart with fear, I found myself before a little hill and lifted up my eyes. Its shoulders glowed already with the sweet rays of that planet whose virtue leads me straight on every road. Both of those quotes that I pulled, he is pulling directly from the two Psalms, and I'm going to quote them. The second quote in particular, Dante is pulling directly from two very well-known Psalms, and that quote is how many sentences? 1, 2. It's like 3 sentences, and he packed so much into those 3 sentences with the imagery. So that would be Psalm 23 and Psalm 121. Psalm 23 is actually one of those Psalms that if you ever had to go to church as a little kid and they put you in like with little kids and they start teaching you things at a young age, that is one of the first passages. It's actually the second passage that you were asked to memorize. And so many people now can memorize it or just like speak it at any time. I'm one of those people. Just it's been ingrained in my head from a young age. It is both of these Psalms in particular, actually, and also Psalm 121. There have been many songs that have been made from it. They're often read during times of difficulty to remind the reader that God is with one throughout all troubles, and that darkness will not be able to consume the individual because of God's divine protection. There is a scripture that is often misquoted. I've heard it taught wrongly. What is it? It's going to come to me. No weapon formed against you shall prosper. That comes from the Bible. People are like, oh, that means I'm never going to go through anything. No, honey. It said the weapon formed. It formed. It's just not going to take you out like it wanted to. So in a way, Dante's also arguing this. One, he was so overwhelmed. He was going down this dark wood. The dark wood in that first quote, the wilderness, the dark wood, that could have overtaken him. However, it did not, because he's pulling from this very important theme in Christianity that with divine protection, again, capital D, capital P, you may go through hell and high water, but it won't take you out, even if it feels like it, right? So let's read these 2 Psalms. I'm not going to read the whole thing. I took the excerpts that are important and directly allude to the imagery that Dante is using, and you'll be able to hear this. You'll be able to hear it. So Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. And again, you can hear it. Green pastures, valley. He's taking that directly from scripture. Psalm 121. We're now going to talk about why he's talking about hills. I will lift up mine eyes unto the hills from whence cometh my help. My help cometh from the Lord, which made heaven and earth. He will not suffer thy foot to be moved. He that keepeth me will not slumber. All right, I'm going to now step away from a lot of the more religious imagery and the religious themes and lessons here and move on to Dante. Now, he spends this whole time, this whole book, all of Inferno, calling people out and putting them in various layers of hell like a savage. So again, this is an allegorical and critical work. He is calling out the church for his hypocrisy. So yes, we just spent the first 20 minutes of this review talking about Dante's beliefs and where he's pulling this from and Christian beliefs and all of that and how it is directly pulled from scripture. However, Dante does call out the church for its hypocrisy. And he does call out well-known figures, politicians, historical figures. He even calls out philosophers. He references Aristotle more than once. He's also calling out people he had beef with, and he puts them in hell. Savage. What a gangster to do that. Isn't that what modern rap artists do, though? Like, let's use Eminem. Hasn't Eminem done that? They've all done it. They have beef with somebody, and they'll put the name in the person. They'll put that person's name in their song. It's a rap battle. So how do we know rap battles didn't originate from Dante? Just saying. He's calling out the people he didn't like or who didn't like him. I'm gonna leave that there. That's why he needs the accent over that E. He was a rapper. There are also so many ancient Greek and Roman mythological references, especially ancient Greek mythological references in this work. He placed Odysseus and Achilles in hell. He placed Odysseus and Achilles in hell. I'm going to get to that in a minute. He also placed religious hypocrites in hell, which we talked about. Makes sense. Perfect sense to me. Dodgy political figures. Makes sense. However, I am not going to act like I understood every single one of these references. I do have a very fair knowledge of ancient Greek and Roman myths because I did study it in university. So I'm familiar with like the Iliad and the Odyssey and various other myths about Zeus and the gods, etc. So those I picked up quite easily, but I don't know who these politicians were. And I will say this edition real quick. This edition. It is the New American Library edition. Has extensive notes. And I had to reference them frequently to figure out who he was calling out. And I still don't know these people. So it is what it is. However, I would recommend this edition of this book if you can get your hands on it because the notes are really, really good. Again, I'm not even going to attempt to call out these people. Like, there are academic scholars with lectures on YouTube who are better for that. This is just a novice's. This is a person who reads for fun and reviews for fun. This is my take on this work. So that's what we're getting. I'm going to skip the political figures. I'm going to skip Dante and his beef with his people. Okay, we're going to skip all that. We're going to go to him calling out the church for hypocrisy, heresy, corruption. Is it possible they were all of the clergy and he is Virgil? In the first life beneath the sun, they were so skewed and squint-eyed in their minds, their misering or extravagance mocked all reason. The voice of each clamors its own excess when lust meets lust at the 2 points of the circle, where opposite guilts meet in the wretchedness. Those tonsured wraiths of greed were priests indeed, and popes and cardinals, for it is in these the weed of avarice sows its rankest seed. That was a tongue twister. I don't even know if that made sense, but there is a quote card. You're welcome. Sometimes there is no one better to call out the issues within the church than those who are in it. It's like when your best friend calls you out for being shady, knowing you can do better. I will say that at first I was a little baffled about why there were so many Greek mythological references throughout this book in particular. Like, my first thought was perhaps he was throwing a bit of shade because the Greek heroes like Odysseus and Achilles are so very flawed, but they're so very loved. They're iconic, right? And Odysseus was known for his guile, and Achilles, well, that temper. Achilles was a hothead. I mean, he did drag Hector's body around trailing after a chariot. because he could. I mean, not because he could. I mean, he did kill his boy Patroclus. So Achilles was like, nah, I got to get Hector for getting my boy Patroclus. But, it was overkill. So maybe at first I was like, maybe Dante's making a point that even your heroes are flawed and can go to hell. That's my theory. That was my initial theory. However, he didn't place them in the deepest bowels of hell. So I was still a little perplexed. So I decided to do some quick research, and it is hypothesized that Dante had a lot of respect for these stories. He had a lot of respect for Homer. So by traveling through hell and seeing these poets and seeing these characters in hell, he's actually putting his own flawed self as a poet. I told you my guy's a rapper. In good company. He's kind of shouting out his own talent by shouting out these iconic characters. But he is reminding himself not to fall prey to the victim of arrogance and pride. Again, his merits aren't going to get him in heaven. So he's being a little cheeky here. He's still clapping himself on the back. I told you, I think Dante is an OG, was an OG. He's dead, but okay. Let's move forward. I'm 30 minutes in. This is going to be fun to edit. I lastly want to highlight something that I do think a question that Dante is answering that I think every human being on the planet has asked. Does perfect justice exist? We have all gone through things personally in life, or we've witnessed things on a grander scale multiple times that are just so egregious and so wrong. And you're like, when are people going to suffer for the evil that they bring on other people, either at an individual level, on maybe even a global or a national or a global level? Like, most decent human beings, we see wrongs and we want it rectified, right? We want justice. We want pure justice. We want good justice. Even if it doesn't necessarily fix the damage that's been done, there is something very satisfying when people get what's due to them. We all know this, okay? We have all felt this in some varying degrees throughout our lives, maybe currently. This is why we have great works like Monte Cristo, Crime and Punishment. We get to see what happens also when we take justice into our own hands. It usually doesn't end up too well, or it can be corrupt. It can be corruptive. And so revenge can lead you down some tricky paths, a slippery slope. In the Inferno, Dante is highlighting divine retribution. That would be divine with a capital D. In the Inferno, through these various layers of hell, which ain't nobody got time to go through. No one's going through that in this review. Ain't nobody got time. Again, scholars are here for that. Just open the book. The book tells you the various layers of hell. I'm being cheeky. I'm being facetious. Am I being facetious? I'm being a little smart. Okay. Inferno, yes, we have these various layers of hell that represents different types of sins. And those in each layer, those who are placed in these various layers are placed there with very specific types of torture based on what it was that they did that landed them there. So it's a symbolic retribution. That's the term that you get throughout this work. These people finally got what came to them, and unless one is repentant, the afterlife will deal out what people are due. So I feel like Dante, in a way, is answering this question. We may not see it on this side, but people will get what's coming to them if they don't get their lives right. Okay. As always, the punishment is a symbolic retribution, just as the simoniacs, probably didn't say that right. That's okay. Made mock of holy office, so are they turned upside down in a mockery of the baptismal font. Just as they made a mockery of the holy water of baptism, so is their hellish baptism by fire, after which they are wholly immersed in the crevices below. The whole work is like that. Each layer of hell is described, and you see who's there, and you see what they have their own specific torture based on what they did. And that is the whole work. It is tedious. It would be too redundant for me to go through and pull out even more than one example because it's in every single section, every single layer. You get, oh, these people did this, so they're going to do this. These people did this, so this is what they're going to get. It is a form of perfect justice. Okay, this was a challenging review to write. It was even challenging to articulate. And I was intimidated to pull this one together because there were so many ideas floating around in my head, and I know I just scratched the surface, which first read, I know that there are people who read this over and over and over again throughout their life, and each time they're picking up something new. The last time something I read made me work this hard and made me write a review this long were A Little Life. I had to break up into, I think, 2 reviews. I still plan to one day review that on my channel because I do think there's a conversation between A Little Life and Lolita that needs to be had, and I haven't seen anybody else talk about it. The Brothers K. I broke the Brothers K up into 4 different reviews, or 4 different sections. I reviewed each part. There's 4 parts to that. The Secret History was a 2-part review. The Greek Way by Edith Hamilton, which is a nonfiction, that review was a doozy. And believe it or not, Outlander, the first book in particular, one of my longest reviews on this channel, it is a 40-minute review because Outlander is one of those books that is initially just seen as a romance. It is, yeah, there is a romance, but that book, Diana Gabaldon, is doing so much more than that, and so it deserved a 40-minute review. Those are really the only works that I've read in the past 2 to 3 years, actually, that have made me write a review this long. So the only reason I say that is Dante's Inferno made me work. It's not long. It's not long. That's it. That's Inferno. And these are the other 2 parts. But I like a challenge. And I'm glad that it was recommended to me and that I decided to take the recommendation. Like I said, I like a challenge. It put me outside of my comfort zone a little bit because there's just so much in it. But I did enjoy it. I look forward to reading the rest of the Divine Comedy. It is also funny. There are times I chuckled. Again, my guy's a rapper. He's a poet. Eminem ain't got nothing on Dante. I'm going to leave this here. Please feel free to let me know your experience if you've read it with the Inferno, and if you have since read the rest of the Divine Comedy. And please, interpretations, share them in the comments below, because I think this is one of those texts that it is one of those texts that can be analyzed for millennia. There's just so much. So I'm going to wrap it up here. We talked about a lot. Feel free to like, subscribe, and leave me a comment. Also, feel free to follow me on Instagram, where I get up to more bookish shenanigans. All of my book content goes there first. I post my reviews in my feed, and I post goofy things in the Instagram reels because the internet helps provide good laughs, does it? So, that is all. I will see you in the next one. Bye.